Start getting this place.
Okay, we're ready to go. Hello and welcome to a special city council meeting on January the 22nd. May we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilor Bettine,
Yes, here, sorry.
Councilor Bricky,
Here.
Councilor White,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Here.
and Mayor Marbury.
Here. Today we are talking about fiscal sustainability in the general fund and a potential April ballot. 2.1 is a discussion and possible action on a resolution submitting to the registered electors of the city at a regular election to be held on April the 2nd, 2019, a ballot issue entitled concerning an increase in city taxes. And Mr. LeBlanc, would you like to begin, or?
I would be
with the
happy.
with the
I'd be
language?
happy to.
Okay.
The city council held a study session last week and reviewed 7 different options that the city staff put together. And it was a very robust discussion. And I would compliment the council for taking the time and making the effort to get into the details and making a lot of time to listen to the community. We have a community that's very active, very vocal. They're not shy in giving their opinions, and that has shown we have some people that feel strongly on this issue. But that doesn't make the council's decision any easier. There are ways to go forward, and there's no perfect way in a democracy to make everyone happy with a decision. What we recommended as staff was called option 2. It's a 10-year sunset on a half-cent sales tax that would be used exclusively for streets. And then the city council, should you decide to act tonight, this would go on the ballot for the April 2nd election. The attached resolution was quickly put together by Mr. Nelson and our bond counsel, Dee Weiser. That is pretty standard. So if there are questions about the resolution, I would defer those to Mr. Nelson. We do have a lot to be thankful for in our city. We have addressed some fiscal issues in our enterprise funds over the past 5 or 6 years. The remaining challenge, it remains in our general fund and also with our transportation fund. The transportation fund, unfortunately, is codependent with some federal and state decisions that need to be made. But tonight, you'll be looking at what we can do to remedy the fiscal issues in our general fund with regard to streets. If you have questions, we have our staff here with some details that we can share if you have questions. And I think unless there are questions of the council on what you're doing tonight, it's just a simple resolution, but not a simple problem to solve.
Well, I would like to insert some language. And I've been reviewing the other sales tax from 2015, I believe. And there was language in that one that talked about an advisory board. And I would like to insert that into this question. And I don't have the 2015 in front of me, I'm sorry. But I think that would also help the voters to react that there would be an advisory board, and that board would oversee the distribution of these projects or these funds.
I have 2015.
Oh, thank you. Could you read that language at the end, towards the end of the, okay?
Yeah, and the last phrase of that ballot question in 15 said, with all expenditures based on the recommendations of a citizens advisory board to the city council and subject to an annual audit. And the 2005 question had similar language. It said, with all program expenditures being first submitted to a citizen advisory board for recommendation to city council. I like that language better.
Do you?
I do, because I think it's clear that it's advisory and council will make the final decision. But those are the two kind of phrases out of the two ballot questions.
All right, well, then I'll accept your professional opinion about that particular language. And I would like to propose that we insert that at the will of the council, of course, but I think it would make it more reasonable. It would follow the pattern that the councils have already established of having financial advisory boards to review the projects. Discussion from council members?
I like that addition, definitely.
I agree.
Yeah, no objection here.
No objection to the addition. I just was gonna take the time, a second, to discuss one more proposed alternative I'd like the council to consider before we move forward on this, if you will.
Go ahead.
I would ask that you just, really hear me out, listen to me fully, and that we just consider this very carefully, because I think that this is a big step. I think you guys all are aware that I'm not in favor of going to the voters. However, with this proposed alternative that I'm going to discuss with you, I think that this is something that I would be in favor of. And it's something that I could get behind. To start with, I would just suggest, I think we all agree that we have a pretty divided community right now. I think there are plenty of people out there who we heard from during our listening sessions who are not happy with how we are managing our resources, and this proposal that I'm bringing up is going to consider them as well. I'm speaking, I'm representing them with this proposal. I would suggest that we heard it loud and clear during our listening sessions that there is a significant portion of the population, there are plenty of residents out there who think and would like us to be, as they quote unquote, living within our means, prioritizing the basics, and maintaining our essentials, which sometimes, as they recognized, comes at a sacrifice. And I recognize that we don't want to make that sacrifice. They're not easy to make, but and I recognize that, quite frankly, it's easier just to ask for new money, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that it's the right thing to do. I think if we go forward with the ballot initiative in April, the one that we have on the table, the one that we're looking at, and just one option for the residents, that it's going to create further community divide and reinforce to a segment of the population that we're not listening. I'm feeling from some of the individuals that I'm speaking with that there's a general sentiment of lack of trust in our leadership. That includes all of us, that includes myself. I'm hearing that people are questioning our transparency. And I'm wondering how, in good faith, we can spend so many hours sitting in those listening sessions and come forward with just this one alternative. And what I wish is that the council would work harder on trying to find a middle ground, trying to make compromises and sacrifices, showing that we're listening and trying to unite the community and bring us together, not cause further division. So the proposal that I want to present to you tonight would be two separate ballot initiatives. It would have your our street initiative, sales tax increase for the proposed street repairs and maintenance as one ballot initiative. And it would have a separate ballot initiative that would consider reallocating Parks and Recreation funding to the general fund for essential city services, be it police, code enforcement, snow removal, adding to our contingency reserves. In this way, with two separate items, we're putting the vote to the people, we're letting the people decide, and we are implementing the most basic democratic principle of people's choice. It would show that we listened. It would show that we recognize there's significant community divide out there. But we also recognize that going to the voters in April is our best opportunity. So we therefore intentionally crafted ballot initiatives that represented all of the people. And in this way, if our sales tax increases it passes for streets, we get our streets maintained at the level that we want. And if the ballot passes for a reallocation from Parks and Recreation to the general fund for essential city services, we maintain our services at the level that we enjoy today. I recognize that this comes at the expense of Parks and Recreation, but what I would like to, at a minimum, discuss with council, we're all aware that just last month, in December of 2018, the rec center debt was paid off to the tune of $1.15 million. This was not previously allocated to Parks and Recreation projects. I feel that it is the most fair and transparent thing to do to bring that to the voters. Let the people decide how those funds should therefore be allocated going forward. And again, I would suggest that these two separate ballot initiatives gives people choice, and it allows them to make the decisions that resonate best for their families and themselves. I think it would show good faith. I think it would show that as elected officials, we're representing everybody. And this type of structured ballot choice for the people is something I could get behind. Our job then would change to one of educating the community on both of the ballot initiatives and really focusing more then on encouraging people to get out, to vote, to participate, to get their voices heard. So then as a council, we implement the will of the people. And that is what I wanted to share with you today.
Well, thank you. Any reaction from the council?
So did you bring language so that we can vote on it tonight? Because we're here.
I know, but given the late notice, this is the difficult thing about an April ballot and a February 1 deadline. We might have to have a special meeting if there was support for this for council.
Melissa,
Or-
this is the special meeting.
We might have to have another one. I've been opposed all along, so I'm just brainstorming ways. I still am receiving lots of feedback from people that would like to have choice. And so I'm bringing that forward as consideration.
Well, let's talk about, do you support her proposal to put something on the ballot to reallocate? I thought we already discussed that last week, but obviously we
In
need,
fact, it did. Yeah, I mean.
let's discuss it again. So would anyone, you're the Parks and Rec representative.
Well, I was clear. I think a couple things. Appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Yusuf's points. I think it is a little challenging. We're doing this, as quickly as can be done. We are at the final point. It's challenging for the council to absorb that idea and sort of construct it here on the fly. There's no question about that. I don't reject supportive part of her idea. I think the timing for me is probably the bigger issue. As I've said all along, I was not in support of reallocating funds that are dedicated funds that the voters voted for in large percentages in both of those ballot initiatives. I've made that pretty clear, and so I still would stand by that. However, I think what Melissa's suggesting is probably a next step in my view. I mean, I think it's a decision. There's another election coming up in November. If the voters in their good wisdom decide that this potential tax initiative that may get passed tonight is not something that they want to vote for again, even though it's substantially reduced in terms of its scope and portent, then we're obviously going to have to make decisions the next time around, not only about the budget itself, because there isn't money in the budget to fulfill those needs in the community, but we'll probably have to do exactly what Melissa's suggesting and then really look at funds that are existing that voters have voted for and how do we allocate those. So I think I would reject the idea tonight. Melissa's right, though. I think eventually those are things we're going to have to grapple with. And I think a vote if the council votes tonight to put this on the ballot, a vote against that initiative, should it look like the one that's written in this program, the resolution that we have before us, a vote against that will essentially tell the council that we're going to have to look at those kinds of reallocations, and Parks and Rec is probably the place that we'll have to look carefully. So I kind of accept the idea, but not the timing. I think at this time, I've certainly been clear in our previous meetings, and we've had several of them. I'm not in support of that. I don't think it's a good use of those funds. Councilor Youssef, I believe that we really do have an obligation up here to, because we've been in all the meetings, we've been in all the study sessions, we are the elected officials that have been elected to make these decisions and study them carefully, that we have the obligation to make this decision. Everything cannot be decided by a voter. The only reason we're having to do a voter decision on this initiative is because of Tabor. And to further complicate that by having more initiatives on the ballot that conflict with each other, I think is not a great idea. But I don't, in theory, I don't refute what you're saying for the future. That may be necessary. So.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
I find the idea appealing, like Councilor Bertine. The timeline is very tight. It's not obvious to me if we could possibly poll ourselves if we could actually gather for another special meeting. However, I think I also, frankly, if this proposal were on the ballot, I would vote yes on the sales tax and no on the reallocation. I agree, what we heard very, very clearly in the listening sessions from the advocates for our parks, open space, trails, and recreation programs, that they feel very, very strongly that the 70% majority, in particular for the 2015 vote, was overwhelming, and they would not wish to see those funds reallocated. So I think and certainly when we were having this discussion last week, one of my major considerations was that whatever we put on the ballot has a decent chance of passing. And I agree with Councilor Bettine that if we put a sales tax issue on the ballot and it is also rejected, that clarifies something from November. The November proposal was complicated. It was facing a very long ballot with multiple tax initiatives. And we heard lots of things about why it might have failed. This proposal is much more narrowly crafted. It addresses two major issues from the November ballot. One, that it was too vague. This has this absolute specificity. This is going to the streets. And it's also a finite length of time. The 25-year proposal for the November issue was regarded by many people as way too long. The total revenues estimated at $200 million actually matched up with the needs that staff has identified. But asking for that all at once clearly was unacceptable. So this is an important piece. I think it has a very good chance of passing. If it failed, then it's very clear the message to the new council and the staff is we have got to cut back. We have got to reallocate money. There's not at all obvious that anything would pass on a November ballot, especially a tax-related issue. And we would have to do, as we did this year, to prepare a budget based on no additional revenues. I think that means significant cutbacks, possibly the reallocation. That's an issue for the new council. It's an appealing idea as an opportunity to the voters if we could actually craft something. But if we have to make whatever decision is on April has to be made tonight, then I can't support trying to edit on the fly.
Counselor Berkey?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I'll say exactly what Councilman White said in a slightly different fashion, is that we did listen. I mean, there's no lack of transparency here. My notes said no property taxes. The previous ballot issue was too long. The extent of the tax was too long in duration, and that was primarily to cover the debt on a long-term service of a debt on a police station. That's no longer part of what we've crafted now, and it was too complicated. And so, just as you were saying, those two options, we're just adding complication to a real simple thing that I don't think our community is divided as everybody. And we're not building a wall here. We're just trying to fix some damn streets. This is not complicated work. Either we have the money to pay for it or we don't. We ask the citizens to pay for their streets or we don't. This is not there's not a big political rift about street maintenance. So I say we put it back out there. We've done exactly what we've been told. We said no property taxes. There is no property taxes included in this. We've shortened it in duration. We've taken every complication out of it, and I'm adverse to adding any more complication to it in the form of a choice of this or that, especially when clearly of all the only really ardent community that came out and said, here's what we want. We don't want you to reallocate parks and recreation funds because that will create a rift in our community because we stole from Peter to pay Paul. And I'm not willing to make that jump yet. Just as Chris said, if that's what happens and that's what we're told to do, to rob Peter to pay Paul, we can do that another time. There was another really good suggestion that came up since our meeting last week, and that was to maybe get along with the county and put it on the ballot with the county roads and bridge tax next fall, if the county puts a road. And so I go, well, because we are the recipient of a portion of that road and bridge tax. Not a significant amount, but it's enough to do a part of what we're trying to accomplish with this particular tax. I thought about that long and hard, and I thought, well, one, it's failed twice. The people in the city of Durango did support it. The people in the county, in that case, we'd be putting our future at the stake of county voters instead of city voters, because we've already supported it twice, and the county's voted against it twice. So I'd rather not go down that road. I just think we've done our work. We've simplified it. Do we want to maintain our streets or do we not? It's for a short term. It's for a very specific cause. It's not going to be complicated to the voters. And if we delay it, which, I can say, it is pretty short term to put it but it's so simple, it should not confuse any voters come this spring. And it's really not about whether they want to rob Peter to pay Paul. It's whether they want taxes of any kind or not. And that's, there's two factions. I think that's the rift in our community, anti-tax versus let's provide the services we need to in our community and the money to go with it. So.
Thank you. Mayor Duckett of Farmington, and many people go down to Farmington to shop. We know that. We have studies that show that there is a leakage to Farmington. Well, the Farmington City Council raised their sales tax to 8.2 from 7.6. So that difference is all dedicated to their streets. And there is no Tabor in New Mexico. So that city council just made that decision. It's in effect. This city council and future city councils are still under Tabor, which means that we go to the citizens to vote. I like what Councilor Berkey has said about transparency. We've had meetings. We've met with many different people. We've received some really thoughtful emails from people that can't come to meetings. I believe that we have been very transparent. We tried to listen to everyone. There certainly are people that are anti sales tax or anti-property tax, but the reallocation of the 2015 sales tax, in my opinion, from people I spoke to, was an absolute don't do that, because I voted for it, and now you're going to do a bait and switch. You're going to rob Peter to pay Paul. So I stand with this city council in that we do one thing at a time. This ballot, as Councilor Berkey has said, it's simple, it's for 10 years, it's for a nickel. It all goes into streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, maintenance of streets, constructions, alleys. It is very specific language. Mr. Lloyd had last week pages and pages of projects that could be scheduled if there was funding for it. There's a paving index which shows the street you live on, the condition it's on, and what should be done to it, whether it's something very simple or something very complicated. And because of the 416 fire, June, July, and August, and September, we were in the hole on sales tax. The city made draconian budget cuts during the summer season. They came back because of catastrophic insurance situations and made another $500,000 in cuts in budgets. And so that is the reality that a city council must deal with. We have a vibrant, thriving downtown business. We have a wonderful community of mostly entrepreneurs, the mom and pop stores here, except for our Walmart and Home Depot, and our glorious TJ Maxx, where people go. We saw a great deal of shopping in November. Our sales tax for October and November are going up. That's wonderful news. So we look forward to 2019 as being a much better year. 2018 is in our rearview mirror. We are going forward. I do not support reallocating the 205. I think that future city council, when Fluter Road and the libraries paid off, they probably will come back and say, hey, let's repurpose that. And they'll have something on their mind to do. And I look forward to being a voter at that time. But I did vote in 1999, I voted in 2005, and I voted in 2015. I knew exactly what I was voting for. And I support our Parks and Rec Department. And we did listen to many, many people and many, many emails that said, don't do that, don't go there. I won't trust you. That is a bait and switch of what I voted for. So my belief is you take one bite of the elephant at a time. I support this particular with the added language that Mr. Nelson's going to add to it. We'll talk about this, but it's very simple. The double expression, keep it simple, stupid. Hey, here we go. 10 years, it's a nickel. I know exactly, as a resident, what I'm voting for. I really like that. And then if it doesn't pass for the future city council, bless your hearts. You have a lot of hard and heavy lifting to do, but we'll cross that bridge. Let's take one bridge at a time. So with that, any more discussion?
I might add, out of the listening session came the provision that you just added as well, in terms of having a financial committee.
Sure. Oh, thank
oversight
you.
committee.
Thank you for reminding me of
And
that.
that was one thing that we didn't include in our discussion the other day, so thank you.
Okay. Well, I was rereading the 205 and then 2015. So that's where the language came from, and I certainly support that oversight from an advisory board. And these are our neighbors, are the residents that live here that look at all the projects, just like they do at Natural Lands, and just like they do at Parks and Rec, and just like they do at Multimodal. One of the things that you learn when you're on city council, you can't make everyone happy, but you try to look at what's overall best for the city of Durango. I support streets, alleys, curbs, and gutters. And I will work on that as a citizen and as a city councilor, and do our best to explain to anybody that has any questions, and we'll see what happens. Any other comments?
Just occurs to me that and I think I know the answer to this, but I'll think out loud here. If the function of such a committee would be only to review the income from this sales tax, we might be wasting their time, because I know I've never been in a position where I felt like I would substitute my judgment for that of the streets department on what the priority should be for allocating an available budget on streets. However, I don't think that we would not, in whatever language emerges here, be specifying the entire remit, potential remit of such a committee. I think it would be valuable in terms of transparency to the community to have such a committee. It's likely to be the choice for the new city council, but if I were here to vote on it, I would accept the broader idea that people have suggested and Councilor Brookie just referred to, the idea of a long-term finance committee. I think we have real needs. We discussed them at length among ourselves. We did a considerable outreach to the community last year. On the other hand, I think one of the virtues of taking this opportunity to going on the ballot in April and avoiding November ballots in the future is that we have, if we just say, okay, we're going to do what we can try to do in 2019, we will try again in 2021, but we've got 2 years to engage the community. Hopefully, and I think this is where such a committee would be really valuable, to really look closely at the allocations of funds all the way across the budget, but especially for the general fund. And to give advice to the council to say, this is what we think would be a viable way forward. One of the disadvantages of doing a November ballot is what we've just discovered. If you lose in November of an even numbered year, you've got all of 2 months to figure it out before you try to have to put something else on the ballot. That's why I think that what we're suggesting is as straightforward and responsive to at least some of the feedback that we heard. 2A was complicated. The proposed 1A is not.
Councilor White, possibly this financial committee, I still like my language on the ballot.
Yeah, I frankly am inclined to say
I like my
yes.
language, but possibly at our study session that begins at 5 o'clock under new business, you might bring up this financial committee. So I know it has been proposed and we've talked about it. So that might be a different place to bring it up.
And another council could vote to extend.
Implement
Implement a broader-based financial oversight
Right,
committee.
because it wouldn't actually go into effect until July of 2019. City manager?
Just to share a couple thoughts, if I may.
Yes, sir.
The city charter gives the council the power to create subcommittees. So this council or the next council could create a committee on its own power. And in my experience, when you put something to a vote, you would put matters that only the people can resolve. You wouldn't put matters that the council could resolve. So if you follow that, the city council has the power. If you wanted to create a long-term finance committee, you can do that. You could treat it just like any other issue that you study. You do some research, find out what other cities do, get comfortable with the language, and then you adopt it, point to people and so forth. But I think the ballot question here is essential for getting the voters to approve or a funding measure. And within this ballot, you'd want to include things that we've heard from the listening sessions. And the committee that we're talking about that the mayor brought up to look at how these funds are spent is consistent with what we've done previously for the special revenue funds that the voters approved in the past.
I think you just said okay to my language.
I don't get a vote, but
Okay, all right, I'm just trying to interpret, but I think my language to be added to this would be, I think you said okay.
And I think also, if we're gonna, this is a pretty big decision, we might want to follow the Roberts rules a little more closely, where you put a motion on the floor with a second,
Okay.
and then the amendment, maybe Mr. Nelson could read that into the record so there's no doubt. We're on TV, there'd be no doubt about what language you're voting on. You vote on the amendment, then you vote, if that passes, you vote on the motion as amended.
Okay, we can be, is discussion closed? Would anyone, Mayor Pro Tem, would you like to say anything
No.
else? Okay, well, if discussion has been closed, then I will look for a proposal, a motion.
I would make a motion to the council approve resolution, is it number 3?
I think it needs 3, right? Yeah, 3.
Our R 2019-3 as provided in the agenda documentation.
I'll look for a second.
Second?
A roll call, please.
No.
Oh,
Yeah, we need,
Amend it.
wait, we want to, yeah, I think,
If you want to amend it, we need, there needs to be, if
I would
a
like to-
motion to amend,
okay.
and that then could get a second and
Okay,
discussion, so on.
Is there a motion to amend?
I would like to make a motion to amend in the, if we could have a reading of what was previously proposed.
well, I was drafting here while you were talking, and what I would, as a suggestion, some language that, just to be clear, we would insert in the ballot question after the word sidewalks and related street improvements, semicolon, and then this language, I would suggest, and we can discuss this, but with proposed expenditures being first submitted to a citizen advisory board for a recommendation to city council. That's very similar to the 2005 language. I can read both sets of language again if you want me, if you would like for me to do that, but again, keeping in mind that the audit language in the 2015 language is probably superfluous, since all of the city expenditures are going to be subject to
Always
audit anyway,
audited,
right?
yes.
So I don't think that's really necessary.
Okay.
But I think that this does create a new, the contemplation would be, just to be clear, this would contemplate creating a new board similar to the advisory boards that review park and rec funds, to make this recommendation to the city council to review the funds that were raised by the new tax proposed in this ballot question.
Correct.
Correct.
And then future city councils could expand the purview of that.
I do think it's possible that if you wanted to create a finance committee, you could delegate that role, because we're not being specific about
Right.
how that board is comprised at this point, as we were not in the 05 and the 15 language. So I think down the road, if you wanted to delegate that review to a citizen advisory committee, that's something that would be permissible, because it clearly would be a citizen board, advisory board, making recommendations to council on finance issues.
And we do have a multimodal board already in place where it could be adapted to include more of a mission, possibly. But that's something, all right,
That's to be discussed.
to be discussed, that's correct. There is a motion to amend. Is there a second?
Well, I'd like to make a motion to amend the ballot language as was provided by
Mr. Nelson?
Mr. Nelson.
I'll second that.
Okay,
As,
we have a motion on
okay,
the
I think
floor.
the simplest thing is just to vote and vote.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor that's been amended to include language. Now we need a roll call. Ms. Phillips?
Counselor White,
Yes.
Counselor Brookie,
Yes.
Counselor Bettine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
No?
Mayor Marbury.
Yes. And so the motion passes. And
That's the motion to amend.
the motion to amend. All right, now we need a motion
We are,
for,
now what's on the floor is the main motion as amended.
as, was there a second on that one?
Yeah.
It's already
I
been
would say it was seconded.
Seconded.
Yep.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Bettine,
Yes.
Counselor Brookie,
Yes.
Counselor White,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
No?
Mayor Marbury.
Yes. Okay, I believe that concludes the business, city manager. It's 4:40-ish, and this concludes the special meeting of the city council. And thank you so much, and we will be adjourning. We have a study session that will be in progress. Thank you all for attending.